Yesterday, we talked about lynching in Georgia. We talked about it in general and said that there were roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 or more people who were lynched in Georgia. I think I told you the story of Willie Dixon, who was lynched here in Baldwin County, or at least he's on the list for being lynched in Baldwin County. Where was he actually lynched? Does anybody remember? Wilkinson County. Remember, he had killed a young woman named Amy Oxford out at the state hospital where he was actually a patient. And we talked about Mary Watson, tragic story, probably the darkest story that you'll hear this entire year, at least in here. Again, it's important that we do that. It's important that we look at the ugly history as well as that which makes us proud to be Georgians. Proud to live in the state. Today, we're going to continue to look at racism. We're going to continue to look at the racial tension that existed in Georgia. We're going to take a little different look at it. We're going to see a different glimpse from a different angle. But we're going to start in 1906. In 1906, Hoke Smith runs for governor. And you might remember Hoke Smith from yesterday. He was at one time the owner of the Atlanta Journal. But anyway, Hoke Smith runs for governor, and his campaign platform is, I will disenfranchise black Georgians. We're going to take away the right to vote from black Georgians. Now, the question I think that should immediately pop to your mind is, can he do that? No, he can't. But he says it long enough and loud enough that people believe it. And so people vote for Hoke Smith, and he becomes the governor of Georgia. Does that sound like something we might have heard recently? You say something long enough and loud enough, and people believe it. I'm going to build a wall. People believed it. When he can't deliver on that, racial tensions elevate even more. They ratchet up just a little bit more. Finally, in September of 1906, September 22nd, 1906 to be exact, the Atlanta newspapers, not just one, but all of them, publish a story or stories about black men that are running around the city of Atlanta assaulting white women. You want to get the juices flowing. You want to sell newspapers. You want to whip the people into a frenzy. Then you do this in 1906. You say that there are white women who are being attacked by black men all over the city of Atlanta, and you're going to get what you want. You're going to have racial strife. You're going to have an upswing in the sale of newspapers. And what happens is the night of September 22nd, a group of white men are out in Atlanta and they find what they're looking for. They're looking for a black man. And they find one riding a bicycle. He's a messenger. He's working. And they basically take him off his bicycle and kill him. They attack him. And this starts a race riot. First one in Atlanta history. As far as I know, the last one in Atlanta history. Started in 1906. You got your notes there, John? Okay. Anyway, for the next 4 days, Atlanta is on the verge of collapse, at least partially. This is Hoke Smith, again, the governor who promised, I will disenfranchise the black voters of Georgia. He can't deliver on it. Even if he had tried, the federal government would have put a stop to it. So, over the next couple of days, the official, there is violence taking place. At the end of it all, the coroner, his official report says there are 12 people that died in the Atlanta race riots. 10 black, 2 white. In reality, it depends on what you read. It's 25 to 40. And if you read really recent scholarship, it's over 100. Regardless, it's more than 12. They're trying to downplay it. They're trying to make it seem like it was less than it really was. September 25th, city officials have finally had enough. The reason they finally had enough is that black folks are fighting back. And the official party line is that this violence is hurting the reputation of Atlanta. Atlanta's a thriving, progressive city. And this violence, this rioting, is hurting Atlanta's reputation. And they were right. But that's not the reason to stop the riot. The reason to stop the riot is what? It's just the right thing to do, right? It's just the right thing to do. But city officials don't until September 25th because they're reading papers from other cities. They're seeing that their reputation is being hurt. The end result, in addition to the dead, the end result is that many in the black community no longer trust the white community. And so what we have in Atlanta is we have segregation before segregation was really a thing. We have segregated neighborhoods, communities in Atlanta. You have the white community and the black community. And you know what? I kind of grew up that way. I mean, I was born in 1962. And I graduated from high school in 1980. I was 17, by the way. And Millersville in 1980, you didn't have black and white neighborhoods. In other words, you didn't have neighborhoods where black folks and white folks lived in the same neighborhood. You had black neighborhoods. You had white neighborhoods. Just the way it was. It wasn't until 1987, Miss Karen and I bought our first house in Union City, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. And we moved into our neighborhood. They had cut a new street into this neighborhood. They were selling lots. They were selling houses. So we bought a lot, had a house built. We were the third family to move in. We're right here in the middle. On this side is a family, black family. They have 5 boys, all under the age of 7. No twins. 5 boys. And on the other side was just a couple. We didn't really get to know the couple very well because they worked an awful lot. They were gone an awful lot. We got to know this family of 7 pretty well. He worked a lot. He was a MARTA mechanic in 1987. Made over $100,000 working on buses and that kind of thing. So he worked a lot. Joel was born in May of 1987, and they were just, I mean, the family over here, they were just great. You know, they loved on us. They brought meals to us. They just took care of us. I mean, our parents were, you know, here in Millersville, and there we were in Atlanta without any family, and so they kind of became our family. And their boys were just precious. After Joel was born, about once a week, Karen would get a knock on the door because she wasn't working. She was taking care of the baby. All 5 of them standing at the front door. Miss Karen, can Joel come out and play? And Karen would say, no, baby, he's not old enough to come out and play. Okay, then. Well, can we have a popsicle? And that was why they really came over, because they wanted a popsicle. But you know what? It was kind of cool that those 5 little black boys felt like they could come next door to a white family's house and visit and ask for a popsicle. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Top right. He's about to be a father for the first time, which means I'll be Papa again. Anyway, there were like 60 homes that were sold on the street. We're the only white family, which, was kind of neat. In 1977, if you had told me I would be living in a predominantly black neighborhood, I would have thought you were crazy. Not that I would have minded it, but I would have just thought you were crazy because we didn't see that. And now we do. And it's really a neat thing. How many of y'all live in a neighborhood where, you got neighbors? None of y'all all live out in the country, out in the boonies? Okay. All right. Is everybody in your neighborhood the same race you are? Tell me about that man. Uh huh. In his trench coat. That's pretty funny. Huh. Well, I think living in community with whoever is in your community is very important. I think, you should get to know your neighbors. You should get to know, the person that works on your car. You should get to know your person that waits on you at Chick-fil-A or wherever you like to eat, because that's part of living in community. I preached Sunday morning at little church, and I was talking about community, just living in community. And I said that my life has not been as rich and full as it could be lately because there's somebody missing in it. And that man's name is James Brown. And I'm not talking about James Brown, the entertainer. I feel good. That's on tape, by the way. Not that James Brown, but an old black gentleman named James Brown. We got to know each other because he walks through our campus just about every day. I can walk through the atrium. Before March, I would walk through the atrium and I would see him sitting in the atrium just chilling out, not bothering anybody, not doing it, just sitting. And then during football season, he would come to football games. Basketball season, he was there at every home basketball game. And eventually I just got to where I'd tell whoever's keeping the gate, let Mr. Brown in. Don't charge Mr. Brown. Let him come on in. And we got to know each other and appreciate one another. And I said Sunday morning that my life has not been as rich and full as it could be because I have not seen Mr. Brown since March because of COVID. I haven't even seen him, off campus anywhere, just walking. And that makes me kind of sad because I love Mr. Brown. I think he's just a fine man and enjoy spending time with him. And Karen called me Monday morning and said, I just saw Mr. Brown walk by. I said, really? He's alive then? Because I was really worried that something had happened to him because I hadn't seen him. And I'm like, if we had not stopped to talk to one another and just spend time with each other, I'd be missing out on something. And I think that's probably true for y'all as well. I mean, think about people that are different than you are, that you love and appreciate. Maybe they're different color, maybe they're different nationality, but your life wouldn't be the same if you didn't know him. I think of Sean Dennis. I've known Sean since he was in college. Coach Dennis. Those of y'all who don't know his first name is Sean. But Coach D. I've known him since he was in college. My youngest son broke his nose at PE one day, and Sean took care of him. He lived in my mom and he still lives in my mom and daddy's house, by the way. I just don't own it anymore. But when my mom and daddy got sick and had to go to the nursing home, Sean lived in my mom and daddy's house just because I wanted somebody that I could trust to live there. I didn't charge him rent. He just lived there. And he still lives there. He's paying rent now, though. Should have bought the dang thing when he had the chance. But that's another story for a different day. But I think about how different my life would be if I didn't know Sean Dennis. It wouldn't be as rich and as full as it is. And again, I think if y'all stop and think about it for a minute, you would be the same way. Now, I said all of that for one reason. That ain't happening in 1906. People are not getting along. People of different race are not cooperating with one another. And unfortunately, and maybe fortunately in some ways, because the black people have some opportunity they might not have had if they lived in the white community, but because they're living in their own community, so to speak, they have a lot of opportunity. Some people who do some really cool things come out of the black communities in Atlanta, particularly Auburn Avenue, which is where Dr. King's church is, Ebenezer Baptist Church. Oh, yeah, probably ought to watch this. If you're watching this on video, hello, everybody say hello. Okay, then you won't watch the video. Sorry. You watch at an angle, you just won't hear anything. Sorry, it's Colin. All right. Yeah, well, they just use the same music for everything. All right. So the Atlanta race riot takes place in 1906. Again, I'm pretty certain, somebody can correct me if they find out differently, that there has not been a race riot in Atlanta since 1906. There's been plenty of opportunity. 1968, anybody know what happened? Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. If any city was going to erupt into violence, it should have been Atlanta, and it doesn't. It's his home, and it would have gone against everything that Dr. King stood for and taught. And so Atlanta is a quiet city. Atlanta becomes known as the city too busy to hate, and that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. So the Atlanta race riots, and that kind of leads us into something that happens a few years later. Here's some newspaper headlines. Negro attempts to assault Mrs. Mary Chafin near Sugar Creek Bridge. Sensationalized headlines. Angry citizens in pursuit of black brute who attempted assault on Mrs. Cheney. 2 assaults. No. There were 3. How many were there in reality? Probably none. And so if we want to lay blame at anybody's feet, I think it has to be the newspapers. Kind of like our media today, sometimes they want to sensationalize things so that people get upset and people act, and then they have news to report. So this is probably fake news used to incite a riot. And I doubt if everybody in that picture or that was involved in the riot looked that way, because there were some pretty beastly boys there. But you kind of get the idea. I mean, it's pretty gruesome. It's carnage there. All right. And that brings us to Mr. Leo Frank. And I told you we were going to get a different slant on things. a different slant because Leo Frank is white, but Leo Frank is also a Jew. And anti-Semitism has become popular in not only Georgia, but in the United States. Jews are different. Their God is different, even though it's the same God of the Christian. He's different. And so hatred toward Jews, that's what anti-Semitism is, becomes a source and a cause of conflict in 1913. There's a little 13-year-old girl, and I still consider 13-year-old girls little girls. But there's a 13-year-old girl named Mary Fagan. Mary Fagan works at the Atlanta pencil factory. She works 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. You know what her job is? She takes a finished pencil and she puts an eraser on the end of it, and she puts them in a box. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. You know what she makes a week? $1.50. $1.50. And she's one of the better paid child workers in Atlanta. She's got brothers and sisters. All of them work in different places around the city trying to support their family. Their family had moved to Atlanta from Alabama, where they had been farmers. So Mary Fagan, she's 13 years old. She works 13 or 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. This is Saturday. It's Confederate Memorial Day. So everybody's off in Atlanta. None of the factories are open. Businesses are open, restaurants, stores, but the Atlanta pencil factory is closed. Nobody's working that day. Mary Fagan goes by to pick up her pay, that $1.50 that she has earned the previous week. She's never seen alive again. Leo Frank is a Jew. He is the superintendent of the pencil factory. It's actually owned by his uncle, and his uncle asked him to move to Atlanta and run the pencil factory. He's got a degree in mechanical engineering. He is from Texas, of all places, but because he went to school in New York, he's considered to be a Yankee. He's considered to be a New Yorker. Well, he's accused of the murder. And part of the story is that Leo Frank made sexual advances toward little Mary Fagan, and she turned him down, and he became enraged and killed her, crushed her skull. We'll get into the details a little later. He is put on trial. There's at least one person who lies on the stand about Leo Frank. Not only does he lie on the stand, but he's a black man. And so Leo Frank becomes one of the first black men or white men in Georgia to be convicted by the testimony of a black man. There's evidence that's planted. There's evidence that's falsified. Regardless, Leo Frank is convicted and he is sentenced to death. And he is sent to Millersville. And this brick used to be part of a wall that imprisoned Leo Frank. That's from the old state penitentiary out at the ballpark at the recreation department at Walter B. Williams. I stole it. I climbed the fence and I stole it. Mm-hmm. I trespassed. Yes, I climbed the fence. And I did not catch my britches, but I did climb the fence. And it's kind of a neat brick. I've got several, but I've brought this one in because there's a fingerprint in it. They're handmade. There's a fingerprint in it. You don't see that very often. It's right here. You might have seen this before, but you can look at it. So Leo Frank is sent to the state prison in Millersville, awaiting execution. He's going to be electrocuted. That's where the electric chair used to be. Or he's going to be hanged. I can't remember what they were going to do to him. He appeals. His appeal makes it to the state Supreme Court. State Supreme Court turns it down, and Leo Frank is out of luck. The governor of Georgia at the time was a man named John Slayton. Slayton doesn't think that Leo Frank did it. He's pretty sure Leo Frank didn't get a fair trial. And he does not want it on his conscience that Leo Frank is put to death for a crime that he did not commit. And so he commutes Frank's sentence from death to life imprisonment. Like, that's better. And he is prepared to spend the rest of his life living in the state penitentiary out here west of Millersville, the state work farm. If he were only that lucky. September 16th, 1916, about 2 years after the murder of Mary Fagan, 2 years after Leo Frank is sentenced to prison, there's a group of armed men called the Knights of Mary Fagan who go to the prison in Millersville and steal, kidnap, whatever term you want to use, Leo Frank. They put him in a car, they take him to Marietta, Georgia, and they lynch him. Why Marietta, Georgia? Because that's where Mary Fagan lived. And so they want to see justice done at Mary Fagan's home, Mary Fagan's hometown, so to speak. But they want her family to see that justice has been done. Because he's a Jew. He's a Jew. Now, he killed a little white girl. Did I say she was black? Yeah. See, if you were taking notes, you would, you know. He's going to be in trouble one day when I say, you know what? Here's your quiz. Take out your notes. He's going to be in trouble. Yeah, well. So, Leo Frank is lynched, and it's from the Knights of Mary Fagan that the Ku Klux Klan in Georgia is resurrected. And the Klan becomes, once again, part of Georgia society. A couple of years ago, there was a student at the University of North Georgia who was doing her student teaching in Atlanta. She went to I think it was an antique store or a yard sale or something. She found a big ring of keys. And what caught her attention was there was a little brass disc on the key ring, and it had the name of the warden of the state prison at the time Leo Frank was abducted. The warden's story had always been his keys went missing. He lost his keys. I'm going to tell you, you just don't open the front door of the prison and walk in unless somebody's helping you. And his keys were suddenly found 2-3 years ago. And they're in a museum in Atlanta called the Bremen Museum, which is a Jewish history museum. It's a pretty cool thing, though, to have those show up after all that time. All right. Leo Frank on the left, very young, in his 20s, and Mary Fagan on the right. She does not look 13 years old. Okay. She's presented as being, very innocent, and I'm sure she was. And he's presented as being Satan himself. Here's the state prison in Millersville. Again, it was torn down a couple of years ago. I think it probably should have been saved, but it wasn't. It would have been a great museum, crime museum, something. But it was torn down. That's why I climbed the fence and stole the brick, because history lives forever. I forgot to tell you, Leo Frank is not in a jail cell. He is actually in the prison hospital at the time, the prison infirmary, because another prisoner in the state penitentiary had tried to slit his throat. And so he has a wound and he's in the infirmary. And those who come to get Leo Frank know exactly where he is. And they go to the infirmary and they put handcuffs on his arms, on his hands, on his feet, shackles on his feet, and they take him to Marietta, where they lynch him. Here you go, the Atlanta Constitution. Mob takes Frank from jail. Prisoner rushed from State Farm in an automobile. You know what my question is? Where's Jake? But there's a mob of about 20. They don't cover their face. They don't care who knows their identity. They're going to see that justice is done for Mary Fagan. And so they take him to Marietta, and this is the result. Here is Leo Frank hanging. Here's an up close picture of that same picture, Leo Frank being lynched. This is a picture that Caden Lloyd brought me the other day, a couple of weeks ago, actually. It was a postcard. Seriously, it was a postcard. On the reverse was postcard. It had a place for the postage, a place for you to write a message, a place for you to write an address. It was a postcard of Leo Frank being lynched. Now, how would you like to get that in the mail? Whew, yeah. Merry Christmas. Or worse, Happy Hanukkah. That was bad, wasn't it? That was really bad. But Caden actually found this, I think, in his grandmother's house or his great-grandmother's house down in Wilkinson County. And he thinks that this guy standing right here with the straw hat is actually, no, I don't think this is, he's not related to this man. I think he's related to this man right here. Of course, it could be this man right here who has the X on him. I don't know. But anyway, one of Caden's relatives is in that picture. Which again, just, no, don't do that. Probably a good thing he wasn't here this morning to see this, but he'll see it tomorrow. You know, and the fact that one of Caden's relatives is in this picture just shows you how small our world is. You know, who would have ever thought? Anyway, Leo Frank his body's recovered. They don't mutilate his body. His body's recovered, and he's actually buried in his family cemetery in New York City. But you can imagine, Georgia caught all sorts of grief over the death of Leo Frank, the lynching of Leo Frank. In fact, let me share part of this with you, if I can find it again. Oh, there it is. This is an editorial. This is an editorial from Charles Moore, who was the editor of the Union Recorder in 1916. In an editorial under the caption Leo M. Frank, the Chicago Daily Tribune says, "The South is half educated. It is a region of illiteracy, blatant self-righteousness, cruelty, and violence. Until it is improved by the invasion of better blood and better ideas, it will remain a reproach and a danger to the American Republic." That's what the Chicago Daily Tribune says. Mr. Moore says, "Such abusive and inflammatory editorials as have appeared in the northern and eastern papers in reference to the people of Georgia since Leo M. Frank was lynched do not tend in any measure to assist in the apprehension of the lynchers nor encourage the officials of the state to use any undue diligence in looking up and bringing to justice the 25 men who are said to have engaged in the enterprise. The real truth about the matter is that about 90% of the white people of Georgia believed Frank guilty and believed that under the operation of the law, his life was justly, legally, and righteously forfeited." So what does the Union Recorder say? The North needs to mind their own business. And by the way, most white people in Georgia feel like Leo Frank got what he deserved. So that's kind of the attitude of lynching in the early part of the 20th century, and particularly in the case of Leo Frank. I'm just reading. Blah, 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 blah. Huh. The people of Georgia do not approve lynching. We use the same 90%. It's kind of hard to read. Lynching. Oh, 90% may deplore the method. They approve the result. Wow. So that's kind of the attitude. That's the what's going on in Georgia at the time. Now, again, Leo Frank. Interesting things happened. There were some interesting things that happened in 1916 and 1913, 14 and 15. But in 1986, 70 years after Leo Frank is lynched, a man came forward with new evidence. And he, the Georgia Board of Pardons does not necessarily reverse the guilty plea or the guilty verdict, but they do come out and say there is reasonable doubt as to whether or not Leo Frank committed the crime. The person that did it was Alonzo Mann, or the person that gave this testimony was Alonzo Mann. He was about 12, 13 years old when Mary Fagan was killed. And he said a man named Jim Conley killed Mary Fagan. That he had seen Jim Conley carrying Mary Fagan's body down to the basement and threatened to kill Alonzo Mann if he ever said anything to anybody. Interestingly enough, Alonzo Mann goes home and tells his parents. His parents tell him not to get involved. Yeah. And as a result, Leo Frank is eventually lynched. All right. What? Oh, no. Here we go. That's better.